And let's get started with our usual soft start. So just letting your breath support you, settling in here to this together space. Connecting with your body. Your seat, the spot that you're inhabiting. And really letting yourself feel the support of the earth. Billions of years of evolution have led to this moment. Just feel the sacredness of that. This is what love has created. All the paradox, all the beauty. Life is offering itself extravagantly to you in this moment. And to the extent that you offer yourself fully, consciously to life, to the moment, there's a dynamic, living, reciprocal flow. Let yourself be in that flow now. Letting go of control, the need to know, just being here. Trusting that in the big picture, all is well. That you're held in the embrace of a love beyond all imagining. Just to be here is a blessing. Thank you. We are going to dive in to PowerPoint. So, session 3, relationship skills and circle preparation. And I want to emphasize right up front the importance of relationship skills and conflict transformation. Because if we don't learn to get along better, humanity will not survive. And what that really means is, or one of the things that it means, is if we don't learn how to repair harm and transform conflict into deeper relationships, we won't survive. And this is what we're doing here together, is learning how to do just that. And it takes courage and it takes commitment to shift the paradigm of separateness, selfishness, and disrespect. There's a heartfulness required and an appreciation of our universal human needs, the depth of those needs, the universality of those needs. The deep longing that we have for connection, and the fact that we're wired for connection, and we're also wired for self-protection. So it's a great paradox. And I think as a culture, so many people were already starved for connection, and now we're more starved than ever, given the pandemic. So there's a healing context, and healing justice is a big part of that remedy. And one of our principles for active peace circles that really speaks to what this is really about, ultimately, we are healing the root causes of disrespect and violence through the direct experience of interrelatedness, even in the most challenging situations. And so, here again, the basic stages. Tonight we focus on preparation and enrollment. And the explicit interpersonal piece of our agenda tonight will come at the end of the session. But I just want to emphasize, and I think it's obvious, that interpersonal skills are implicit throughout this whole process. And that what we're really doing in the preparation and enrollment phase is we're preparing for the circle process, the circle or circles, as the case may be. So hopefully you have seen this. This is out of the basic stages document, which is a 2-pager. This is just the preparation and enrollment section broken out. These are our intentions. We clearly identify the issue and build a community leadership team to guide the process. The leadership team determines who needs to be involved and initiates outreach efforts. And tonight, the leadership team is you and your small groups. And hopefully beyond tonight, because it is going to take a core group to make healing justice happen, to make active peace circles happen. Our goal is to have those responsible for the harm actively participating in the entire process. There are ways around that, potentially, but this is our goal, and typically an important part of the process. We present the restorative goals, methods, and ground rules in a consistent way. In pre-conferencing, which we'll talk about tonight, we go deeper into the harm and assure that those who caused harm take responsibility. The process unfolds organically, and we move forward knowing that there is no guaranteed outcome. So it's actually quite straightforward, right? In preparation enrollment, we invite people into the process, right? Once we have a sense of what the harm is, a basic sense of what happened, maybe we are invited, as in our scenario tonight, to initiate this. We invite people into the process. We cultivate the restorative mindset as we go. We are exceedingly careful to not set up any re-victimization, any re-traumatization. We attend to power differentials, and these will often be in play. So I want to speak to that here and say the question for the leadership team, the people doing this organizing, is it workable? Is there a way to balance that out that's workable, that's safe? If we always caved into power differentials, we would probably rarely do an active peace circle. And the cycles of violence and injustice would continue. So we have to be willing and courageous enough to really step into this territory using all of our tools and all of our creativity to see how we can work with what we have to work with, including privilege, patriarchy, racism. Yeah, this is deep and this is big, but this is a huge part of breaking the cycles of harm. So yes, we want to step carefully in this territory. We want to remember what our ultimate goal is, to bring people together to repair harm. It's not to label people, it's not to tear anybody down. But as these things become clear, and as there's more awareness and more call in our culture to name these things, it gets to be an important part of our healing justice process. And hold the heart ground. Hold those 5 R's, yourself as a leader. So this is what I called in our last session, holding the high ground. And one of our participants, my friend Bonnie, offered a reframe of that. She said, I like heart ground, feels so much more resonant. And I really like that. So here it is. And really the main question is this initial circle feasible? Right? We don't have to imagine ourselves too far down the road if this is a situation where many circles are likely. But is an initial circle focused on just hearing the full extent of the harm? Is it feasible or is it not? It might not be. And you've gotten the principles before in as a handout in the Google Doc. And I just want to highlight 3 tonight for the purposes of our scenario. That participation is always voluntary, that we appeal to the basic dignity and universal needs of all people. And again, do not re-victimize. So one of the ways we do that is, other than some initial agreement to participate in the circle, those harmed are not asked to invest in it until those responsible for the harm have agreed to participate, begun to participate, and shown some good faith effort and the ability to participate in a healing, good faith way. So the pre-conferencing stage is a key part of the process that we haven't really talked about before. So this is where it starts to get a little more formal, yet we're still preparing to bring people together in the full circle. So this is where the facilitators would meet with the person who was harmed or the people, meet with those who caused the harm, meet with other stakeholders. Community members are always a part of the process. Systems people might be a part of the process. People representing the criminal justice system, whatever that system might be, because we're out to change systems where appropriate. And there could be other stakeholder groups. So in individual meetings with each of those groups to really start to get the stories out, get their perspective on what happened, let folks vent when they need to vent, validate those feelings where that's appropriate, support them with reframing certain things to help them see maybe a bigger perspective on something, go deeper into the harm and assure that those who caused the harm are taking responsibility, continue to cultivate that restorative mindset, explain the circle process in detail. Here's what will happen when we come together. You want people to have a really clear idea of what it's going to look like. Really being really clear about the 5 R's, the ground rules, which I will send you as a link tonight. I don't know that you've seen those yet. They are in the Google Doc. And get that buy-in, So now that you know what this is about, now that you know how serious a process this is, we're not messing around with our ground rules and our 5 R's. Are you in? Are you able to do this? And then you, as facilitators, along with the larger leadership team, if appropriate, make a final determination about going forward, right? On your own, separate from the pre-conferencing. It's like, okay, now we know what people are bringing. Is this feasible? So that's the preparation and enrollment phase in a nutshell. And it actually is quite straightforward. And here's the thing, right? If it doesn't fly, what have we lost, right? There's something so beautiful about just simply inviting people into this process. We're not asking anybody to do anyone any favors, right? Particularly those who caused the harm. This is an invitation for them to connect with their full humanity, their dignity, right? To show up. And nonviolence has always been about this. It's always been about redemption for everyone involved, along with the justice that is sought. So we're going to go into our breakout group after a short period of Q&A. I just want to stop the share, see if there's any questions. Just please unmute yourself if you want to ask a question. We've got a little bit of time here. And I know it's fast. I know there's, you know, we're really dropping in a lot really quickly. So I do appreciate that.
Scott,
Yes.
in thinking over the scenario that you offered us
Mm-hmm.
and the reality that the person who did the touching didn't seem, you know, to feel that it warranted labeling in some sort of way. And I thought, what about some situations where one, you know, I would consider using languaging like describing that person as the person who participated in an action where someone felt harmed, rather than calling them the person responsible for the harm, in order to gain their, to me, it's sort of like you're innocent until you're proven guilty. And so that's why I thought of using some sort of language, depending on the situation, where you say to that person, you participated, you know, or did you participate in this situation where this person felt harmed?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Bonnie. I hear that, and I appreciate that. And I guess just an initial response is, as long as it doesn't compromise the integrity of the process, which is about identifying harm and repairing harm. And so, you know, we want to not be wishy-washy when that just isn't a fit. You know, yes, we want to respect people. We want to see them for their full humanity as outlined in all of our principles and as upheld by the 5 R's. So I would just guard against unnecessary words in that sense. You know, but again, I appreciate the point. And I think that's all I've got on that at the moment. Thank you.
Scott,
Yes.
I just don't, I would never feel comfortable taking a high ground. To me, it just doesn't feel right. It connotes, particularly in Western cultures, but everywhere, it's a vertical hierarchy. It connotes privilege. It's not like, I know that it's the moral high ground. I know that that's what you intend. But to me, what I would be doing is not taking a different ground. I'm taking the same ground, the one you are portraying, the one of basic goodness. That's the ground we all share. And as a facilitator or as a member of the circle, I would never take the high ground. No, I would go with everything else you said.
Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah. Well,
felt.
Again, another really great point. And I would just harken back to the little reframe that I did on this just a few minutes ago. Heart ground. You know, it's the 5 R's. The 5 R's is what we're talking about.
If you say the heart, yeah, that much better.
Yeah.
I'm totally with you in the heart ground, but not the high ground.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Time
Just
for
a thought on that. I think for me I think for me the key concept with high ground is that it's not higher ground. It's simply a calling to a high moral standard that we do want to be on the same as everyone. We want everyone to be on that high ground, not on, you know, some blame, shame, all of that kind of, I guess, different ground or whatever.
Thank you. And I hope everything that I've pointed to speaks just to that. That is certainly the intention here. Maybe time for one more?
Yeah, I have a question. So the person who has done the harm or participated in harm could be seen to be being judged. You know, like, okay, you did this to me. How do you establish that that person is on the same ground as everyone else, the heart ground, the person who is the one doing the harm? Because I could see people who have harmed others walking away from the process because they feel that they're, you know, like sticking out as being the person who did the harm. So
Well,
do you get my drift? That I'm confused.
I certainly do. And, you know, all I can say to that is I think this process is doing everything conceivable to make it clear that this is not about blame, shame, and punishment. I don't know what else to say. And there is a distinction to be made in the first two sessions and in the preparation and enrollment to some extent. Some of the stuff I'm putting down is for you as leaders, for you as organizers, as possible facilitators. You know, holding the heart ground is not necessarily a phrase that would come up in an active peace circle, right? The 5 R's will, but it's more for you, you know, because you are there to model it. You are there to make it as crystal clear as you can that this is not about, yeah, they're already standing out because they caused harm, you know, and let's be clear about that, right? Honesty with compassion. There's space for both here. So I hope that helps.
Thank you. Thanks.
So we're going to move into the breakout group. So I'll just go back to, just want to make sure everybody's muted again. And go back to the PowerPoint quickly. Thank you for those questions. I love them. They're all so right on and really contribute, really fill out the picture. So in our breakout group, you hopefully have the scenario questions, which are going to be your focus. You'll be in groups of 3 or 4, and you'll have a half an hour to just work those questions. That is your task. And again, just as a review, the preparation enrollment intentions from the basic stages document, the questions themselves, and again, these 3 principles that we're highlighting. Appeal to the basic dignity and universal needs of all people. I think that's really relevant to some of the questions that were just raised too. And I want to encourage you to have a facilitator for this half hour. It would be great if somebody would just volunteer. And your main role as the facilitator is to make sure that all voices get heard. Particularly all the voices other than your own. Yes, be heard, get equal time, but as a facilitator, you really want to help make sure that all the voices are heard and that all the questions get addressed. So 5 questions, half an hour, it's about 5 minutes per question. It's not a lot of time. So again, I encourage you to really speak from the heart, speak the essence of what you want to share, because there just isn't time for much else. And so just remember that this is practice. So really take the pressure off, be less than perfect, and hold the beauty of what you're practicing here, what brings us together here. So I'm not going to be sending you any kind of messages. I will just pull you out of the groups in half an hour, and we'll welcome back. Looks like not everybody's back yet. There we go. So I would love to hear takeaways, learnings.
Okay, I can say something about our group. We had a lot of questions in terms of who would need to be in the circle. You know, motivation. I mean, we just had, I would say, as many questions as we had answers. And unless one of my group wants to add something to that, we'll probably listen to, maybe we'll find answers to our questions.
Well, I mean, that makes sense, given where you're at, learning the process, and the yeah, there's lots of room to move in something like this. So let's hear from other folks, and maybe we can come back to some of those questions.
So Scott, one of the things that came up in our group was recognition that as a facilitator, particularly around question 4, we'd really have to be clear about our own triggers and biases in order to hold that process.
Yes. Yeah. And I love how you frame that. Interpersonal skills was the other part of our session tonight. And so the very next thing we're going to work on is triggers and judgments and some things that I think you will find supportive. And it's why I've structured this the way I have and emphasized so much the personal, the heart ground, and for that very reason, because it's triggering territory. Thank you.
In our group, we did a role play, and Peter's actually going to put up on the chat the list of things that he came up with that felt good or not good based on how we responded in the role play of the attempt to try to get Jesse, or is his name, whatever, to join the group. And we spent quite a while doing that and just seeing which things really felt good, which phrases felt good, which phrases didn't feel good. And there was a big focus on the importance of safety and him feeling safe to be willing to join the circle. We didn't get to do that then for Kate. Actually, James, that's was his name, yeah. But I thought that was really helpful.
I love that. Could you give just 1 or 2 examples of phrases that felt good, that resonated with the group?
Peter, do you want to do that?
I see there's stuff in the chat.
Call him James.
Yeah, a couple of things that felt good. Yeah, this was sort of our way of approaching this. Not the phrase "not to judge" felt good. Open-minded to help her, that felt good. Big one that was a double thumbs up for me was intention and impact, sort of explaining the difference between intention and impact, because I'm in a defensive mindset of like, hey, I didn't do anything wrong. It's somebody else's problem. So those are a couple things.
Thank you. Those are lovely.
We were in group 7, and but actually it was good sailing. We thought that maybe we did different alternatives, like James does want to participate, honestly, to clear his name or for whatever. But also, would we hold a circle if he doesn't? And we all agreed that we would go ahead without him, because it would then have a different function, you know, of supporting Karen. And then we also had questions like the re-victimization that is so traumatic for victims. Some of us felt that, Karen would have to have a circle of support before entering the circle and not discuss anything about what happened in the circle. And some of us felt that, well, she can have the circle of support, but whatever happened has to be discussed in the circle, and she obviously will relive it, but with support this time. So then we were automatically silenced and brought back.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, but
I love that.
A question.
Yeah, so just to underscore a couple of those points, that in the circle itself, the support is there's support right there for her. Somebody sitting on either side of her, who are people who are just there as support. And in the pre-conferencing, which is the next phase, a lot of this gets worked out. We really work with James to start practicing taking full responsibility so that it doesn't go south in the circle. Not to say that it can't, but we're going to do our utmost to make sure that that doesn't happen.
But if he doesn't agree to come willingly, voluntarily participate, because we took that as a golden rule, then we go ahead and do the circle anyways.
Yeah, I loved how you decided that. So restorative justice in the criminal justice system, that wouldn't happen, right? Because it's all about someone who caused the harm and a harmed party. Here we have a lot more flexibility, and we have this beautiful process that can be flexible and meet people's needs. So yeah, I love what's coming out here.
One thought of that, one thought on those lines, a coworker of mine had developed this procedure in which victims, so it was victims of abuse in our case, but they could write an apology that they would want to receive from the person that harmed them and have someone else read it to them. So that could be done in a circle like that, where the person that is responsible is not willing to come, but someone else reads something like that. It's really powerful. It's amazing how it kind of tricks your brain and you still feel this level of healing just from hearing that apology that you actually wrote, but coming from someone else in the place of the person that harmed you.
Yeah, so awesome. And I'm just reminded of this phrase that we use in restorative justice: trust the wisdom of the circle. And I think just in your small groups, you experience the wisdom of the group. And so, yeah, there's so much room for creativity here. So yeah, this is great. And I see some things going in the chat. And so I will send the chat out to everybody. But I just want to keep hearing voices. Anybody who wants to share. We have a few more minutes for this.
Well, Scott, I'd like to say in our group, we kept coming back to the fact that this was a group of friends, and that
Mm.
one of the big motivation for the people involved and for it being successful was that this was a group of people that need healing. So we were holding that friendship container for them in a high level of hope that they could hear James describe why he did or what he did, asking questions like we do in RJ. Tell us what happened. What were you thinking? What have you thought since? Can you name the harm? And then little by little, bring everyone else into that. But that it was about the whole group of friends in the end.
Right. So the ripple effects go all the way out to
Yes.
all of those people, right? And that's a little wrinkle that I threw in. That's not always going to be the case. Probably not usually going to be the case that it's a small circle of friends. Anybody else?
Yeah,
Yes.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Bonnie.
In our group, one of the things that came up was to say that it seems like it would be good to have an educational piece of somebody who's done research or whatnot on sexually inappropriate touching, so that there's an educational piece to this, and something from outside that circle and outside their social mores.
Absolutely. Yeah. Really key to educate somebody if we want to break the cycle. So I have Louisa and Jessie. Louisa?
Yeah, in our group, we were talking about people that wanting to be part of the process or willing to be, and I thought one of the good statements made was, we don't know what will happen. We don't know what will happen. So one has to have the courage and take a chance, not knowing the result. And that's that person they have to have, that kind of trust in the whole process in order to be able to do it. It takes courage, and we have to acknowledge that to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that non-attachment to outcome is right there in our principles too, because we don't know. Jessie, final question, thought?
Taking a note here. Well, my thought was actually, we're not going to end up being equipped to run an active peace circle at the end of these sessions, right? Wouldn't you think it would take more? I mean, is your assumption it would take more training? I think it might take more training.
Well, that's my assumption for most people here, and I'm starting to give some thought to that. Yeah, there's a pretty wide range of experience here, and so I appreciate that sentiment, and I also feel like there's a way in which someone might never feel ready.
Sure.
And yet they are, as long as they hold to the principles, hold that heart space. I think all of that really minimizes our risk of causing harm. And again, if it doesn't fly, what have we lost?
Well, that's actually my question. It feels like we could lose a lot that could cause harm.
Well,
I don't understand why.
Well, but the harm's already there. The harm's already there. And yes, if somebody is invited into this and refuses, that could feel hurtful. But the hurt is already there.
Okay. I'll think about that.
Is kind of, let's reflect on that.
I think just by making an attempt itself, it already can be open, and both people can feel
supported, even if the one that caused the harm feels bad about it. But I think that not doing anything can cause more harm.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. Thank you. I love that note. And we need to move into our close, believe it or not. Yeah, thank you for engaging in that. I know that was a leap. So, interpersonal skills. And I want to acknowledge that I trust that everybody in this webinar already has some really solid interpersonal skills. And so I just want to be really honest about how challenging this territory is, right? This is humbling, challenging territory. This is where the rubber meets the road. And please make sure you're muted until the very end of the webinar. And in the scenario, you got a sense for that, the importance of interpersonal skills. So all I'm going to do tonight quickly is just underscore a few basics. Love this quote from Chogyam Trungpa: the more we give our best, the more we are able to receive other people's worst. Isn't that great? It is great. It's a beautiful thing to show up as an adult in a world that so desperately needs that. So we're going to start with triggers, what some people prefer to call re-stimulation, because what's really happening here usually is that there's some very young wound that gets re-stimulated. And that's why the response is often so disproportional to the stimulus, because there's something young in play. It's not really rational. So some of the really basics are really knowing what triggers you. I think somebody said that. And knowing when you're triggered, what are the physical sensations, what thoughts arise. Those are the basics. And then the deeper way to work with this that's transformative is to tune into the unmet needs or longings that are associated with the trigger. And to bring some acceptance and empathy to that longing. Oh yeah, I'm feeling hurt and angry and upset because I have a deep longing for connection and safety. And that is healthy and human and natural, and just to let yourself feel that energy. Feel the life energy in that. There's something that's not personal about it. It's life moving through you. You know, life wants you to have your needs met. You know, there's a longing from that creative intelligence. So there's a life energy that's in play here. And just notice and feel any shift. So this tuning into the longing relates to the very first foundation that we put on our list. Tune in to the deep longing. So here it is again, and it's in that bearing witness practice that I sent last time, and that's in the Google Doc, and another practice I'll give you after the next session. So briefly on triggers, moving into another just really fundamental, judgments. And here's for me, a game-changing quote from Marshall Rosenberg out of his initial book on nonviolent communication, which will be in the resources from this session. Just sit with that quote for a moment. Judgments, criticisms, and diagnoses of others are alienated expressions of our own unmet needs. So that stops the finger pointing and brings it right back to ourselves. It basically says any intervention, any interpretation that makes a problem out of somebody else separates us from the truth of who they are. It takes us out of alignment with life. And it's, in Marshall's words, an alienated expression of our own unmet needs. So to me, for me, judgments is the reminder that I get regularly that the belief in separateness is still alive and well in me. And so it's humbling. And so I'm going to offer you a couple of practices.
Estoy ocupada. Estoy ocupada.
Victoria, could you just mute yourself, please?
Oh, sorry.
No
Sure.
problem. I'm going to give you a couple of exercises that just relate to just noticing judgments. Because the more we can notice our judgments, work with them, the better able we are to support others in noticing their judgments and being in that heart ground. And I think that can come in very handy in healing justice circles and in life in general. And vulnerability, a quality of unconditional openness, naturalness and innocence, a willingness and ability to listen and be changed, the ability to bear witness, which we'll talk more about in a future session, a really key capacity in its own right, willing and able to be truthful. So here again, vulnerability is probably not a word that would ever come up in an active peace circle, but it's for you to hold as a leader, as a facilitator. And finally, truth-telling. And I just want to share a brief story here. It's from Jack Kornfield, who some of you will be familiar with. He tells a story of being a young boy riding in the car with his father. And they're listening to music on the radio. And the program is interrupted by an emergency announcement. And the broadcaster is telling people that Pearl Harbor was just bombed. And the United States has just officially entered World War II. And then the music comes back on, and father and son are quiet. After a little while, Jack Kornfield's dad looks at him and he says, "Don't tell your mom." And I just think that's such classic old paradigm, right? That is not truth-telling. And so we're not going to go into detail in this exercise, but I'm going to give it to you to come back to. It's a pretty strong exercise around just being aware of how you may not be fully aligned with radical honesty. And I want to thank Robert and Judith Gass for this particular practice. So the foundations that kind of flow from tonight, the willingness to unmask privilege, patriarchy and racism, a new thing I will add to our running list, and vulnerability, openness, and humility. The resources from tonight, again, I will send an email with these links. I'll also include the feelings and needs inventories from the Center for Nonviolent Communication. That has meant so much to me to build my vocabulary around feelings and needs. And his basic book, which if you haven't read it, or even if you have, I mean, that's one to read again. It's very radical and paradigm shifting still to this day. And a final quote: "Do whatever you must with people, but never shut anyone out of your heart. even for a moment. Neem Karoli Baba. May our time together ripple out to benefit all beings. Thank you for being here again. I so appreciate you showing up for this. And I'll just unmute everybody really quick. And let's say goodnight. And remember again the Google Doc for questions.
Night.
Good night.
Night.
Hey,
Thank you.
Scott.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Scott.
For your insight.
Thank you. Thank you.